This is my 1964 MGB. There are many like it, but this one's mine. Today, I'm sharing with you how this fine piece of British engineering ended up in my possession. About a year ago, I came across this car posted on Craigslist. I saw it listed for sale for many days. It seemed to me nobody wanted it. So I figured the only way to find out why no one wanted it was to go see it for myself. So I did. In the Northwest, we have two things in abundance: rain and trees. This little car was in the woods, in the mountains, in a tent for 16 years. The 5 years before that, it was in the woods, in the mountains, without the tent. This is what I found when I arrived. It always troubles me a little to see a car in this condition. Fortunately, the more I looked, the better I felt about it. It was dirty and had some rust, but the floors were solid, and with the exception of the hood, it was a pretty straight car. The engine sat next to it, and everything else seemed to be either in the car or in the trunk. So I struck a deal with the owner. The next day, my good friend John and I set off on our journey to bring the MGB home. We hooked up the winch and dragged it out of its resting place for 21 years. This is what it looked like when we got it on the trailer. So we got it this far onto the trailer, and I think our battery is out of juice. So we're gonna winch it up the rest of the way. Anyway, again, 64 MGB. How's the inside? Well, it's got seats. They're on top of the rest of the car, but
Yeah, fantastic bargain.
keys are in it. It's got a windshield. You know, I don't want to say how much I paid for it
Each one can hold 33,000. Braking strength.
as I back up the hill here.
Yeah, the sure strength.
But part of the transaction, I traded this, a 1967 British Seagull outboard.
Yeah, Bob, you got a nice tilt.
And now we're going to try to crank it up a little bit. Let's see what we have to work with. As you can see, I've done quite a bit already. I removed the lights, pulled the wiring harness from the front and the back of the car, and removed the bumpers. Also, as you can see, I pulled the transmission and drive shaft. All that's left here is the rear suspension, the front suspension, the interior, and the dashboard. Here's a little history about the car before it came into my possession. It was owned by William and Sandy. They loved this car. They drove it through the mountains, along the ocean, through the cities and towns. They owned the car for over 40 years. As their son grew older, they passed the car down to him. He continued to drive it. Unfortunately, he did not continue to put oil in it. When the engine seized up, they had it towed home, and there it sat, in the woods. The years passed, and William and Sandy missed their drives in the little car. One day, William asked Sandy, "Why don't we buy a Miata?" She replied, "Why don't we fix the MG?" So, William, being an exceptional woodworker and mechanic, began the repair of the MG. He got as far as machining the block, installing a new crankshaft, and fitting the cylinder head. Then Sandy fell ill. She did not get better. After Sandy's passing, work on the car stopped. It sat quietly in the tent. Days turned from months to years in what seemed like a blink of an eye. Dust and dirt layered upon the car as it slowly sank into the sandy northwest soil. During that time, a large rock came loose from the cliff above the tent, fell through the tent, and landed squarely in the hood. Finally, William decided to sell it. I was quite moved when I heard this story of the car, and I decided at that moment this little MG needed to be saved, and I was going to do it. So many people don't understand how such a little car can have such a huge impact. This car is not about nuts and bolts and grease and oil. It's about love and dedication. It's about how a child from Abington can become an adopted and loved member of a family. So, this loved 64 MGB is going to be restored to her former glory. And I'm going to do it. Watch me.